My GF texted me, "I think maybe we should break up." I surprised her by replying, "I agree. Your stuff will be on your porch in an hour." Her response was desperate and confused. "Wait, it was just a joke." But I was serious. Let me tell you how 3 years of my life ended with a single text message on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting at my desk in downtown Seattle, staring at campaign performance reports that weren't going to review themselves, when my phone buzzed. "Alexis." The message was short and to the point. "Ryan, I think we should break up. This isn't working anymore." Most guys would probably feel their stomach drop, maybe panic, start frantically calling or texting back. But here's the thing. I felt relief. Pure, clean relief washing over me like I just set down a weight I'd been carrying for months. See, this wasn't the first time Alexis had pulled this move. This was her specialty, her go-to play when she didn't get her way, and I'd watched her perfect it over the past year. Last month it was because I couldn't take a random Wednesday off work to go to her friend Rachel's rooftop party. "You never prioritize us," she'd said, then hit me with the classic, "maybe we're not right for each other" line. Before that, it was because I suggested we split the cost of her birthday dinner instead of me covering the whole $300 tab at that overpriced steakhouse she'd been Instagram stalking. Each time, I'd done exactly what she expected, begged, explained, reassured her how much she meant to me, promised to do better. And each time, she'd graciously forgive me and take me back, like she was doing me some massive favor. The pattern was so predictable I could have set my watch by it. Something wouldn't go her way, she'd threaten the relationship, I'd scramble to fix it, and we'd be back to normal until the next test rolled around. But sitting there in my cubicle, looking at her message on my phone screen, something clicked. Maybe it was the way she'd phrased it this time, so casual and dismissive, like she was canceling a dinner reservation. Maybe it was because I'd had a good day at work and my head was clear. Or maybe I just finally hit my limit after 3 years of walking on eggshells. Instead of panicking, I typed back the most honest response I'd given her in months. "I agree. Your stuff will be on your porch in an hour." Then I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. The response was immediate. My phone started buzzing like an angry wasp. "Wait, what?" Followed by, "Ryan, that's not what I meant," followed by 3 crying emojis and, "Can we talk about this please?" The messages kept coming, one after another, and I could practically see her face changing from smug confidence to genuine panic. I was just frustrated, I didn't mean it like that. Then came the kicker. "I was testing you to see if you'd fight for us." There was. The truth she'd never actually admitted before, laid out in black and white on my phone screen. She'd been testing me. All those fights, all those threats, all those times I'd bent myself into knots trying to prove my love, they were tests. Experiments to see how far she could push me, how much control she really had. And the worst part? I'd been passing them. Every single time, I'd given her exactly the reaction she wanted, the validation that she could manipulate my emotions with a few carefully chosen words. But not this time. This time, I'd called her bluff, and she was scrambling. I closed my laptop, told my supervisor I had a family emergency, and drove home to my Capitol Hill apartment. Alexis had been gradually moving her stuff into my place over the past year and a half. Nothing official, mind you, just little things here and there that somehow turned into half my closet and most of my bathroom counter space. As I started gathering her belongings, I realized just how much of my own space I'd given up without even noticing. Her skincare routine alone took up 2 entire shelves, and don't get me started on the 19 different hair products cluttering my shower. Every item I packed felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The decorative pillows that made my couch uncomfortable. The scented candles I was allergic to but never complained about. The stack of self-help books about conscious relationships that she'd bought but never read. By the time I finished, I had 7 boxes and 4 garbage bags sitting on my front porch, and my apartment looked like mine again for the first time in months. My phone had been buzzing nonstop the entire time, but I'd left it face down on the kitchen counter. When I finally checked it, there were 52 missed calls and enough text messages to fill a small novel. The progression was almost funny: denial, anger, bargaining, more anger, panic, and finally, desperation. "Please just talk to me," the last message read. "We can work this out." I love you. But I was done working things out. I was done being tested. I was done with a relationship where my partner's first instinct was to threaten to leave every time life got a little complicated. So I turned off my phone, ordered Chinese takeout, and settled in to watch Netflix on my own couch, surrounded by my own pillows, in my own space. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe. What I didn't expect was how quickly things would spiral completely out of control. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in months, but that peace lasted exactly until I checked my phone and saw the aftermath of my decision. 52 missed calls. 52. I scrolled through the call log and watched the timestamps. She'd called every few minutes from 11 p.m. until 3 in the morning, then started up again at 6 a.m. The text messages were worse. A complete emotional roller coaster spanning 7 hours, from "I can't believe you do this to me," to "Please baby, let's just talk," to "You're making a huge mistake," and back around again. But I'd made my choice and I was sticking to it. I had work to get to and a life to reclaim. Around 10 a.m., I heard a car door slam outside my Capitol Hill apartment, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone stomping up my front steps. I looked out the window and there she was, Alexis, standing on my porch next to the 7 boxes and 4 garbage bags I'd packed the night before. Her mascara was already running down her cheeks, and she was wearing the same clothes from yesterday, which told me she probably hadn't slept at all. She started pounding on my door like the building was on fire. Ryan, I know you're in there. We need to talk." I stayed put on my couch. I'd learned enough about manipulation tactics over the past 3 years to know that opening that door would be like stepping into quicksand. The pounding continued for about 5 minutes before I heard her trying the doorknob, then rattling it when she realized it was locked. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. "You can't just ignore me." Then came the sound I wasn't expecting, a loud crash against my door. She'd picked up one of the boxes and hurled it against the door hard enough that I could hear things breaking inside. That's when I knew this wasn't going to be a normal breakup conversation. Things got really interesting when she pulled out her phone and called her mother on speakerphone, right there on my porch. "Mom, you need to talk to Ryan," she said, loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. "He's being completely unreasonable. He won't even let me explain." I could hear her mother's voice through the door, sounding tired and exasperated. "Alexis, honey, what exactly happened? You were so upset last night you could barely form complete sentences." And that's when Alexis made the mistake that would change everything. I told him we should break up because I was frustrated, and instead of fighting for our relationship, he just agreed. I was testing him. I wanted to see if he'd fight for us, and he just gave up. The silence that followed was deafening. Even through the door, I could feel the weight of that pause. When her mother finally spoke, her voice had completely changed. "You were testing him? Alexis, you told him you wanted to break up, and when he respected your decision, you're angry at him for that. It wasn't supposed to be real." Alexis protested. "It was supposed to make him realize how much he needs me." "Sweetie," her mother said, and I could hear the disappointment seeping through the phone, "that's not how healthy relationships work. If you wanted to talk about your problems, you should have talked about your problems. You don't threaten to leave someone as a test." There was more back and forth, but the damage was done. By the time Alexis hung up, her own mother had essentially taken my side, telling her to come home and think about what she'd done. That should have been the end of it, but Alexis wasn't ready to accept defeat. Over the next 4 days, she launched what I can only describe as a full-scale emotional warfare campaign. First came the fake pregnancy scare on Thursday morning. "I'm late," she texted. "We need to talk about this." The thing is, we hadn't been intimate in almost 4 weeks, something she'd been withholding as punishment for some imagined slight I couldn't even remember. When I pointed this out, she claimed birth control could fail retroactively or something equally ridiculous. That lasted exactly 1 day before she moved on to her next strategy. Friday brought the social media offensive. Suddenly, my Instagram and Facebook feeds were filled with crying selfies and vague posts about giving someone 3 years of your life only to have them throw it away over a misunderstanding. She posted pictures of us together with captions like, "I guess love really isn't enough sometimes," and when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. The comments from her friends were predictably supportive, lots of "you deserve better, girl," and his loss reactions. But here's what really got me: she was actually trying to rewrite history in real time. According to her posts, I was the one who had ended things over some minor disagreement. There was no mention of her breakup text, no acknowledgement that she'd admitted to testing me, no context about the months of manipulation that led to this moment. She was painting herself as the victim of a heartless boyfriend who dumped her out of nowhere, and her audience was eating it up. Saturday, she escalated to showing up at my gym near Green Lake at 6 in the morning, telling the front desk staff that she was my girlfriend and had lost her access card. When they called me to verify, I had to explain that we'd broken up and she wasn't authorized to use my membership. The embarrassment in the staff member's voice when they had to ask her to leave was almost enough to make me feel bad for her. Almost. By Sunday, the mutual friends started reaching out. Connor, my buddy from college, called to ask what was going on because Alexis had been messaging him about how worried she was about my mental state. Apparently, I was going through something and needed intervention from people who cared about me. It was masterful, really, positioning herself as the concerned ex who just wanted to help, while making me look like I was having some kind of breakdown. The worst part was watching people I'd known for years suddenly questioning my judgment based on her carefully crafted narrative. But I held my ground and slowly, the truth started to come out. I thought the social media campaign was rock bottom, but I was wrong. Alexis was just getting warmed up. The harassment started escalating in ways I never could have predicted. Monday morning, I got a call at my marketing firm downtown from someone claiming to be a nurse at Swedish Medical Center, saying I'd missed an important appointment and needed to call back immediately. When I explained I hadn't scheduled any appointments, the voice on the other end suddenly became very familiar. "Ryan, please, just give me 5 minutes to explain." It was Alexis, doing a terrible impression of medical personnel. She'd somehow found the main number for my company and convinced the receptionist to transfer her through by claiming it was a medical emergency. I hung up immediately and had to explain to my confused coworkers why a fake nurse was calling me at work. That same week, she started showing up everywhere. And I mean everywhere. Seattle's not that big of a city, but it's big enough that running into your ex at 3 different places in one day should be statistically impossible unless someone's planning it. She'd appear at the coffee shop near my office during my lunch break, lurking at a corner table with her laptop open, pretending to work. She'd be at the grocery store I always went to on Thursday nights, conveniently shopping for cereal in the same aisle I needed. When Connor and I went to our usual trivia night at a bar in Fremont, there she was with Rachel and 2 other friends, sitting at a table with a perfect view of our booth. Each time, she'd make a point of looking heartbroken and tragic, like she was bravely carrying on despite her devastating loss. But the worst part was how she'd corner our mutual friends during these chance encounters. I watched her perfect her victim story over the course of several weeks, each retelling more dramatic than the last. According to Alexis version 2.0, I'd broken up with her via text message out of the blue. Version 3.0 had me screaming at her and throwing her belongings into the street. By version 4.0, I was apparently emotionally abusive and she was lucky to have escaped. She was rewriting our entire 3-year relationship in real time, and because she got to these people first, some of them actually believed her. The breaking point came when she recruited professional help. I got a LinkedIn message from someone named Harmony who claimed to be a certified life coach and energy healer, wanting to discuss spiritual closure and karmic healing related to my recent relationship transition. The message was filled with buzzwords about conscious uncoupling and releasing toxic patterns, but the basic gist was that Alexis had hired her friend to contact me about getting back together using New Age terminology. I looked up Harmony's profile. She'd gotten her life coaching certification from some online course that took 6 weeks to complete. This woman had known Alexis for maybe 2 years, but she was reaching out to a complete stranger on LinkedIn to mediate a breakup. That's when I realized Alexis wasn't just desperate, she was completely detached from reality. But even that wasn't her final move. About a month after our breakup, I was coming home to my apartment in Belltown when I found a guy I'd never seen before standing outside my building. He was tall, probably early 30s, and looked like he was waiting for someone. "Are you Ryan?" he asked as I approached the entrance. When I confirmed, his whole demeanor changed. "I'm Kyle," he said, stepping closer in what was clearly meant to be an intimidating way. "Alexis told me what you did to her. How you messed with her head and made her think she was crazy." I stared at him, trying to process what was happening. "I'm sorry, who are you exactly?" "I'm her boyfriend," he said, puffing out his chest a little. "And she told me how you emotionally abused her, how you manipulated her into thinking the breakup was her fault. She's been crying every night for weeks because of what you did to her." The irony was so thick I almost laughed. Here was this guy, confronting me on behalf of a woman who had literally admitted to testing me, based on a story she'd completely fabricated. But instead of getting angry, I did something that surprised both of us. I invited him upstairs. "Look, Kyle," I said, "if you're dating Alexis, you deserve to know what you're getting into. Give me 10 minutes, and I'll show you exactly what happened." In my apartment, I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots I'd saved of our text conversation, including her admission that she was testing me. I showed him the doorbell camera footage of her throwing the box at my door and calling her mother on speakerphone. I even had the police report I'd filed after she impersonated medical personnel to call my workplace. Kyle's face changed as he looked through everything. The aggressive posture melted away, replaced by something that looked like recognition and dread. "She told me you broke up with her out of nowhere," he said quietly. "She said you were controlling and made her feel like she was walking on eggshells." "Kyle," I said, "run as fast as you can." He left without another word, and I never saw him again. But Alexis's final desperate act was still coming. The next week, I walked out of my office building near Pike Place Market to find her sitting on the sidewalk across the street with 2 handmade signs. One read, "Let's talk," in big block letters. The other said, "You can't ignore love." She'd been there for who knows how long, just sitting cross-legged on the concrete like some kind of heartbroken protest. Building security called the police, HR got involved, and I had to explain to my boss why my ex-girlfriend was staging a sit-in outside our office. That's when I realized this wasn't going to stop on its own. Alexis had crossed the line from desperate into stalking, and I needed to do something about it before it got even worse. The restraining order hearing was the reality check Alexis desperately needed but absolutely didn't want. I'd spent 2 weeks documenting everything: screenshots, police reports, doorbell camera footage, witness statements from my coworkers who'd fielded her fake medical calls. Walking into that King County courthouse, I felt like I was carrying a briefcase full of evidence for a criminal trial. Alexis showed up with her mother and what looked like a folder of printed text messages, probably planning to paint me as the real problem. The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd clearly seen this type of case before. She listened to my presentation with the kind of focused attention that made me feel like every detail mattered. When I showed her the text where Alexis admitted to testing me, the judge's eyebrows went up. When I played the doorbell audio of Alexis calling her mother on speakerphone and admitting the whole thing was a manipulation, the judge actually leaned forward. But when I described finding her camped outside my office with homemade signs, the judge had heard enough. She turned to Alexis and said, "Ma'am, let me make sure I understand this correctly. You sent him a breakup text, he agreed to break up, and everything that's happened since then has been you trying to force him to take you back." Alexis tried to explain that it was more complicated than that there were feelings involved in 3 years of history, but the judge cut her off. "Ma'am, you broke up with him. He accepted. Everything else is harassment." The 200-yard restraining order was granted immediately, but I should have known it wouldn't actually stop her. Legal documents are just paper to someone who's already shown they don't respect boundaries. Within a week, she was testing the limits in creative ways. She couldn't contact me directly, but she could have Rachel send me letters on her behalf. She couldn't call my phone, but her mother could call from blocked numbers and hang up when I answered. The most audacious move came 3 weeks later when I got a call from HR telling me they'd received a job application from someone named Alexis for an open position in our digital marketing department. She'd actually applied to work at my company, apparently thinking that would force us to interact or that I'd somehow have to help her get hired. When HR rejected her application, partly because of her qualifications, but mostly because of the active restraining order, she threatened to sue them for discrimination. That's when my company's legal team got involved, and let me tell you, corporate lawyers don't mess around. They sent her a cease and desist letter that basically shut down any legal threats she was planning to make. The consequences for Alexis started piling up fast after that. The restraining order was public record, which meant the full story finally came out among our mutual friends. People who'd been sympathetic to her victim narrative suddenly had access to court documents that showed exactly what had happened. Rachel, who'd been letting Alexis crash on her couch for 2 months, finally kicked her out when she realized the extent of the stalking behavior. Connor told me later that half their friend group had been uncomfortable with Alexis's version of events but hadn't wanted to get involved in relationship drama. Once they saw the police reports and court filings, the support network she'd been counting on evaporated almost overnight. She lost her job as a social media manager after missing 3 days of work following the court hearing. Apparently, she was too upset to function and just stopped showing up. Her parents made her pay rent to live in their house in Tacoma, and the judge ordered her to attend therapy as a condition of the restraining order. 8 months later, I barely recognize my life, and I mean that in the best possible way. I moved to a better apartment in Queen and with actual counter space and windows that get morning sunlight. I got promoted to senior marketing coordinator after landing a major client campaign that I probably wouldn't have had the mental bandwidth to handle while dealing with Alexis's drama. I replaced all her decorative nonsense with things I actually like: a decent sound system, artwork that doesn't make me cringe, furniture that's comfortable instead of just photogenic. The apartment feels like mine again, like a space where I can actually relax instead of walking through a minefield of potential relationship conflicts. The strangest closure came last month when I ran into Alexis's mother at the Whole Foods in Capitol Hill. I almost didn't recognize her at first, but she spotted me and walked over with this expression that was half embarrassment, half relief. "Ryan," she said, "I owe you an apology. I should have seen what my daughter was doing and said something sooner." We talked for about 10 minutes in the produce section, and she filled me in on the aftermath I hadn't heard about. Alexis was dating someone new, apparently, a guy she'd met on a dating app who actually enjoyed the drama and mind games. They break up and get back together every few weeks, her mother said with visible exhaustion. He thinks it's passion. I think they deserve each other. She apologized again before we parted ways, and I could see the genuine regret in her eyes. You were good to her, Ryan. Better than she deserved, and definitely better than she appreciated. Walking back to my car that day, I realized I felt nothing but gratitude for how everything had played out. Not gratitude for the harassment or the legal complications, but for the clarity it had given me. Alexis had done me a favor with that breakup text, even if she hadn't meant to. She'd shown me exactly who she was and exactly what our relationship had become, and she'd forced me to finally stand up for myself in a way I'd never done before. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. I'm living proof of that.